All right, welcome to September's Friday Live. Thanks everybody for coming out. We have a lot of new faces. I noticed. So Jake, who's going to be our guest, I'll talk about that in just a second. Has brought some. He's brought his own fan base, which is kind of nice. So versus some FileMaker cross pollination. This week or this month, I should say, we're going to have our community spotlight again, which was really popular last month. We have NaviQ. Paul and Vanessa Costanzo. That's recorded. They had a lot of really great tips on how they go about running projects and keeping things on track and in line. This month we have Jake Johnson from Angel City Data. He's the director of design, and I've had the great opportunity to work with Jake over the past I guess about 6 months or so, and we'll talk about that a little later on. So I'm really excited to that. But we're going to riff on FileMaker and some of the things that they built. We also have continuing our HTML segment, which is a part 6 of, and it looks like there's a typo in there. I apologize about that. And that's going to be that's been really popular as well. You can go back and see part 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'll post a link a little later on in the chat for that. And if you're looking for it, you can go from our marketing website, and there's a section called, or a link called Awesome FM BetterForms, and that takes you to all the links for all of the shows. We're also going to be talking about the Navigator's Share API, which is a kind of a neat mechanism for natively sharing pieces of data, whether it's files or links. Andrew's going to be talking about that as well. Couple other quick things that we're just going to run through. This meeting is recorded. If you're looking for the recordings, we usually release them about a week later. So that'll be announced in our Slack group, but we also send a link sometimes in our next email. So if you look at the bottom there, there's a link to the prior month. And again, you can find the links through our YouTube channel and through our marketing, www.fmbetterforms.com. We do try to keep the meetups interactive. We don't want them too presentational a little bit, but I guess sometimes they are, because that's just the nature of some topics. But so please do feel free to chime in and ask questions. And I think that's it. A couple little bits of news I just want to mention really quick. We had an update that we pushed mid-month this month. The main pieces in that were a new Actions editor. It's a drag and drop Actions editor. If you're not familiar with Actions are in FM BetterForms, they're like a native language that the application of the platform uses to control things. So you can send instructions from the back end to the front end, or have instructions and actions run on the front end to maybe navigate to a different page, run some JavaScript, maybe it shows a modal or a card modal, things like that. So we released that editor. We previewed it about 2 months ago in the Friday Live as well, if you're looking for more information on that. We also did some improvements on collaboration. So if you're a dev house that has multiple developers, you'll see some changes there. Includes a few things, some really neat features with page locking. So if two, you either have multiple tabs open, or you have you're working on a particular form and somebody else is working on another page, one of those people will become the owner of that page. As one person makes a save, the other one is live, and it updates automatically as well. So you both stay in sync. So that's a big thing. We find that for dev houses that have those bigger teams. We've also did a lot of bug patches. We did about 20 or so bug patches. These are documented, but the documentation for those isn't super easy to find. We're working on a way of making that a little bit more in an automated fashion. So that'll be coming up in sometime in the near future. Eduardo, part of our team, he has completed phase 1 of our network operations, or upgrades, I should say. That includes things like, we don't really talk about actually our NetOps too much, but BetterForms runs in multiple data centers, and it uses Kubernetes and Docker and things like that, some other orchestration software. And we did a lot of updates there. And then we're going to be changing the way some of that works, using some different services. Primarily, we use AWS, and we're going to continue to use AWS. These updates were all seamless because we have multiple redundancies. So as we operate one thing, we just route traffic off of that. Phase 2 he's going to be working on this quarter, and those upgrades will increase stability. And we're also starting to work on infrastructure as code. So currently our data centers are provisioned manually. We have a sort of a binder, if you will, on how we replicate a new data center or have to rebuild it or anything like that. But we're going to be changing that over to infrastructure as code, where it's a little bit more automated. Some people may be familiar with that, with digital infrastructure like that with FileMaker, because you may have a click a button and it deploys a FileMaker server. Well, in this case, it deploys an entire data center. So it's a little bit more complex. But that's something that we're working towards as well. Coming up this next month, a few people from our team are going to be going to Engage You. If you are in Europe, and I know I did see some European faces, logins in our meetup, and hopefully we'll get a chance to meet, and you can buy us a beer or we'll buy you a beer. We're going to be in Antwerp, November the 12th to the 14th, and You is a FileMaker, Claris, I should say. I think they're the primary sponsor, but I believe it's run by ClickWorks. And it's going to be a really exciting seminar, or sorry, a conference. I haven't been to this one yet. This is going to be my first one for me. I've been to a number of the .fmps, which are quite good as well. And this is a lot of the same people. So that's going to be good. We're going to be giving two presentations there. One is going to be introducing FM BetterForms and just demonstrating some things. Andrew and I will be doing that from our team. And then the second one is going to be a talk on CRDTs, which are conflict-free data replication techniques. So just basically mechanisms for taking a big data object here and making it look like this data object over there. So it's kind of a niche topic. We're going to be having some special promotions on for that event, so watch out for that. And I think they're going to line up with Black Friday. I think that's sometime around then as well. We do have one more thing just really quick, is we have a back to school promo, and the way that back to school promo works, I'll just tell you really quick about that. And that's been running for this month. Basically, it's on our citizen development plan. And what we're doing with this is we have some special workshops that we've planned, and where people who sign up, if you're new to the platform and you want to build some type of a web portal, we have a really, really nice portal that we've featured in the past, and a lot of people have been building apps on this. The way this promo works is for $5.99 for a year. And what we'll do is we'll actually build one custom page that, if you have some kind of really advanced widgetry, need some kind of drag and droppy click draw thing that's on there, somebody from our team will build that page out up to 3 hours worth, and that's included. So that's about a $500 value on its own. And to register for that, I'll put the link in the show in just a few minutes, but you can also get to it from our main site. All right, we're going to get started right away. We've been having a pretty popular segment with Pearson and our UX Corner, so I'm going to hand it over to him, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Charles. Good morning, everybody. So today I want to show an example of a real world scenario that I was working through this week, and I had some help from Andrew. And this is just relating to making sure that your user experience is applicable to everybody, and mitigating the workflow for different types of users, not just based on them as a person, because I've touched on accessibility. Some people might have poor eyesight and stuff, but here I'm specifically talking about accessibility through their devices, because everybody has different devices, and that experience can change depending on who, or depending on what software hardware your user is using. So in this case, this is just an app where someone signs up to get into this workflow. They have to be invited into this to join this app. But this is more than just a web app that they sign into. We wanted to the premise of this was to create a shortcut to the website from your home screen on your phone. So without having to just go to your browser every time and type in this URL, we wanted to have kind of a simulated app experience. And I think I know there's a term for that. It's escaping me right now. But essentially just turning this web page into an app on your phone. So we have some special instructions for those users to do this. But what we found, and I was working with Andrew on this, was that there were some inconsistencies between my experience and his experience using what we thought was the same hardware. Um, so as I was building this out, we discovered that there are uh, some users will be able to just tap a button and add this website to their home screen as an app. Easy enough, you click a button and it's done for you. But that doesn't apply to everybody. I think this we discovered was only applicable to, I think it was Android users, maybe using Google Chrome as their browser, something like that. Some kind of unique circumstance allowed them to do this. So what happens if you don't have uh, that exact piece of hardware and software? How does the user use this? Because the way we've built this is the only way to use the actual content of the app is to access it from this home screen shortcut. So I tried to do it on my phone, and so we were doing some research into how to save a website onto your phone's home screen. Safari, I have an iPhone. Safari, I could do that no problem. I wrote some instructions here. Um, but when I was trying to do it on Chrome, I didn't have the option to click a button and click add to home screen. So I was a little concerned. I was like, oh, well, what happens if a user like me doesn't have Safari and they only use Chrome, or they're just not aware that Safari will allow for this? And Andrew said, "Oh, I can do it on Chrome. What I don't understand the issue." And so we did a little digging. Turns out my phone, even though I thought it was on auto update, it was a few software updates behind, and so I didn't have this capability of adding this web page to my home screen from the Chrome browser. So just all of this research and all of this digging into the experience of users with different circumstances uh, forced us or gave us the knowledge to create very specific instructions that we're hoping, from what we've looked up, should capture everybody's experience, no matter what software they're using or hardware they're using. So just as an example here, the instruction says, before you get started, add this app to your home screen. Um, how do I add it to my home screen? You click that, scrolls down, and so we have what used to be instructions for iPhone and instructions for Android. We discovered that that's not the main key difference. It's Chrome versus Safari versus Opera versus any other browser software. So we're creating instructions for each of those. And so something like with Chrome, um, someone like me who didn't know that their phone was behind on some updates, we have this prompt or we have this special instruction. Here's how to do it with Chrome, but you have to have this specific parameter met. So iPhone users have to be on 16.4 or later to use this Chrome ability. So just something like that is a very important and uh, key element to providing a proper user experience, and that's understanding the user as a person, but also understanding what software or what devices, what hardware are they using. So that applies to if they're using mobile or desktop, that could change the user experience. If you're on desktop, you have the ability to uh, indicate certain information using hover. So if you're hovering over something, maybe it highlights. If you're hovering over an information icon, maybe that brings up the tooltip. But what happens if they're on an iPhone, or what happens if they're on a tablet, a touch screen? You can't hover on those. So now you have to think about, how can I still display that information on a touch screen without having to hover? So those are just some tips there for contextual design. Um, and another note I wanted to hit on just with this, because this particular screen is kind of unique. Just in our experience, we haven't built, I haven't designed any screens like this with kind of uh, these kinds of instructions and an example of a screenshot to provide context. when I made this screenshot of here's an example of what your phone should look like, this was a very intentional screen grab because this isn't my screen because as I said, when we were trying to do this, I couldn't get an app added to my home screen, so I had to kind of Photoshop this or manipulate it. Um, but the apps that I chose in the background of this image were very intentionally selected. Uh, just this is a little more design rather than UX, but when I wanted to show an example of what your phone should look like, I wanted to keep all of these apps as generic as possible. I didn't want to bring attention to anything else because the main focal point is this Santa Margarita app. This is the app that we're building. So when I took this screen grab of an example phone screenshot from the internet, it has some other apps in there, some uh, just random other developer apps that I didn't know what they were. They weren't part of the default operating system. There was one screen grab that I tried to pick, but it was all like uh, an artsy background, so it kind of took some attention away from the main point of this image. So just finding a an image with as little distractions as possible, making everything darker, highlighting the thing that I want to bring attention to. All of these were very intentional and conscious decisions in uh, providing instruction through an image. So those are just some quick tips from me today that I wanted to relay to you guys. Um, I just thought this was kind of an interesting uh, scenario that I was faced with this week, and I wanted to share that with you guys. Um, I've been, and I'd love to hear any thoughts that you guys have, if you have any questions or follow-ups. But I also wanted to ask if there was any interest in me showing how I use Figma as a software to help me design websites. I've heard from a couple of our users that they were interested in, or that they've tried to use Figma the same way that I do, just to plan things out. And they said they had there's a bit of a learning curve that they weren't able to come over very easily. So if there is any interest in maybe some short UX or Figma tutorials, whether it's through a Friday Live segment or even just our own mini classes or something, feel free to let me know. That's something that we have sort of discussed in the past, and there's been some interest in that. So just trying to get a gauge on what the overall interest is there. But yeah, definitely open to any questions you have now. Any follow-ups? I see Peter asks, is the help text conditional, like uses Navigator app, shows only the relevant information to help? I think you're referring to this help text, and at this point, it's not conditional. I think that it also showing uh, the different browsers kind of opens up an opportunity for the user to decide what software they want to use to open this app with. Because whatever, if you are using Chrome and you select Add to Home Screen, it's going to be using the Chrome browser, even though a lot of that UI is going to be hidden. You want to at least give them the option, like, hey, if you've opened this up in Chrome and you're about to add it to your home screen, you have the ability to open it up in Safari if that's your preferred browser or something. So kind of, I understand, like sometimes it is uh, more beneficial to show conditionally the information that is clearly um, relevant to the user at the time, but sometimes it's good to give them more information to say, here's other ways that you could do it if you chose. um, can Figma be used for FileMaker design? So Figma, I'm using this software, and the way it's built is that you're not using it to build any kind of specific software. It's a tool to design anything. It just happens to be really good at designing user interface. So technically, you could design anything. I think with FileMaker, uh, there's some design capabilities that I've seen. It's not as powerful as what Figma could design, but still I use Figma for very low fidelity mockups as well. So very simple designs. Figma can still be used for that. Is Figma better than from Sketch concerning BetterForms? I've heard of Sketch. I know Sketch. This is before I entered the industry. I know Sketch was kind of an industry standard while I was still in school. But while I was in school, I've seen that the industry standard has kind of moved away from Sketch and more into Figma. I like Figma because it's free. There are paid subscriptions that you can use, but when I was in school, I had a free Figma account and I could create stuff without having to pay any money. I think Sketch is a subscription-based software. I could be wrong on that, but in my experience, Figma, Sketch, Adobe XD, they're all very similar, borderline just interchangeable, but I prefer Figma. That's kind of the software that I've learned on, and so that's what I've become used to. I also think that, especially for a free software, it is, in my opinion, more powerful and more simple to use than some other software out there.
Just to add a couple of things, it's for us, technically, it's not free, but it's pretty reasonably priced because we have 2 designers who use our account, and then we have another 8 or 10 people who are consumers of that information. So they're in like a read only or a view only mode, and they're free. So, for $30 a month, we end up with this cloud-based application that's great for sharing. And one of the really nice things that that Pearson didn't really mention, but from the developer side, is like we click on a button in there and we know the exact colors, we know the actual hex color, we know the how many pixels it is padding, the padding along the side, is that 4, 5, 6 pixels. We can make all these measurements and all of these kinds of things. So it's really, really good. It's really designed for developers in that sense.
Yeah, I think that's I was trying to pull that up in the developer uh window, and I've not actually used this too much, so I keep getting this pop-up. I'll just try to skip through all this, but if I've selected this button, yeah, it shows the padding, a lot of the information down here, just at a quick glance. Um, and I'm sure it really helps the developers translate my designs into something that they can build.
Cool.
Yeah. Um,
Actually,
if
what I'll do is let me just demo this. I don't think there's any problem with that. I'll just demo what Pearson was building there. Not the exact page because I'm not sure where that is in the app, but I do have the app sort of shared on my desktop. So here's my one of the pages from my phone here. And it is the actual page, as you can see here. And you can see right along here, there's that Santa Margarita icon. Now, they're probably that's their logo, so it's probably not really optimized for like an iOS style icon. And that's something that's is going to improve the experience. But when I launch this and I launch it and the app loads, now this, for all it's a called a progressive web app. So basically what that means, it's a web application that's saved. All of the assets are saved locally on the device. And in this case, it's not designed to work offline, but it could be. But the main thing here is that the application launches almost instantly. It doesn't require connectivity. And this particular one is used by sales reps, from what I understand, and they can go in and see different things. So if I was to search for wine, and you can see the data is already here in this front end. There's maybe, I don't know, 400 or 500 assets or something like that. And it's already here. I can, they did a nice job building this. This just got built, I think, this week or last week, but I can go through, I can sort the different things. I can find things by winery or region. And so on. This menu bar looks a little bit different on the screen than it does on my device. It's actually more visible on my device. And let me jump back into here and let's jump into one of these items. And again, it's effectively a native app. I can jump into some documents and I want to find out some document here. And this is pulling data from S3 and it's loading up. So now I have this data right here for the sales rep. rep, I can just jump back a page. Let me check for audio things. Here's some podcasts, and I can start to play this. Right. And now I have access to all of these assets from a sales aspect. Here's some video here. And let's check this out. And the neat thing, I don't know, if I'm using Reflector, and Reflector starts to play the video in full screen on my actual device, but it would normally play on here if I wasn't using Reflector. And then it jumps in. So it's a really nice experience for these sales reps. Zero information or zero app to download. They don't have to go through any approval process. You effectively have a native. Let's see if did it disappear on me? Yeah, so somehow after I shared there, it disappeared, my Reflector. But you effectively have this native application. So it's a really, really neat thing. If you're interested in learning more about PWAs, let us know, and we'll have maybe some more Friday Lives featuring that specifically. All right, thanks, Pearson. We're going to jump over to Andrew, who's going to be showing us something that he actually used within this app, and it's called the Navigator Share API, and it's designed for sharing stuff.
Sure. Let me get set up real quick.
Sorry, I'm just going to try to unshare my screen here.
Yeah, so one of the requirements for Santa Margarita, the app that Charles just showcased, was the ability to share those different files or assets that were in the application. And rather than creating your own share menu or dialog, we can take advantage of the browser's native share dialog using the Navigator Share API. I made a little example here. This should be public now, so if you want to take a look at this example, it's very simple. You can get started. At the end of the day, it's just a button that calls some action that runs your JavaScript, and then opens up the dialog. So we have a button here. I have a little button that looks like a share icon. This button is tied to an action, so you have to create an action in your named actions, and I'll get to that in a second. And then finally, you add a click action onto your button, which calls that JavaScript. This click action is something we're going to be going into more detail on in our next segment for our Back to Basics. But here's how it looks. If you click on this button, this opens up your native share dialog. And this looks different on the device you're using. For example, I'm on a PC. However, if you're on a mobile device, Mac, Android, whatever, you might see a different screen. But this is the same share dialog you'll see if you click share in like social media, like Twitter, Instagram, etc. And it's a very nice way to share links or files with people in your application using the native web capabilities. In the code here, you'll see my implementation. The button itself is here. I have a little div with a click action. This click action runs my named action called share. In the page info tab, you will see my named action share. And all this is doing is running this quick line of JavaScript. You could technically run this in line on the click action itself. But doing it in the named action gives you some more flexibility on maybe some fallbacks. For example, if the browser doesn't support the share API, which is very rare. On the example itself, you'll see that I have a link to the docs where you can read on some more information and also some examples on how to add a fallback in case their system doesn't support sharing these type of files. And yeah, I think that's it for that.
All right, so Andrew, that could be just run from a regular BetterForms button as well.
Yep, it can be run from any element that you can put an action on, and
Right.
we'll be showing how to add actions to elements in our. I think
Does the
segment.
share API require a physical user interface click?
So it doesn't. Technically it does, but there's some workarounds that you can do in JavaScript to simulate a click of a button. In the docs, you'll see that there's some security that says it must be triggered off some UI event. However, you can essentially simulate a click of a UI event to start the same process as you would normally with a button click. This is very similar to something like playing audio. By default, the browser won't let you play audio unless the user triggered some kind of events. But there's definitely workarounds you can do to get past that.
Okay, cool. Cool. And that example is public now.
Yes, this example is now live for people to use.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, we're going to jump over to our part 6 of our basics in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and whatever else they're going to be covering. So I'll flip it over to you guys.
Yeah, well, welcome back to our Dev Corner. I'll be screen sharing, and for this Dev Corner, we'll be diving into the basics of handling events in Vue that will help us manage user interactions. So in Vue, you can bind events to HTML elements using the on directive, or the shorthand be the more readable @click. And I'll be introducing some possibilities, and later Hassan and Andrew will be demoing. So for events, you can do an inline handler, and this is used for simple logic. For my demo here, I've got a button and it's got an @click, and it's got some text in here that says click me to add one more to the counter. What my one line of JavaScript is doing is grabbing the counter variable that I have and incrementing it by 1. So using an inline handler is pretty good if you just have one line of JavaScript that you need to do. But if you have something that's more complex, you should be using method handlers. Method handlers are used for more complex logic that's not doable with an inline handler. So if you had more than one line or much more complex logic event listeners, you would definitely be using a named action and calling that when the button is clicked. There are a bunch of different events that you can have. Click isn't the only one. There's also input events, and this one is with an input element. We've got a type text, and I'm using the @input event, where the @input is real time. As soon as you type a key on your keyboard, it will trigger the named action and update the model. And in comparison, we have the @change. And the @change is not too immediate. It is triggered after the input field loses the focus. For example, if the user clicks outside of the input field or they press tab, then the named action gets called after the value is changed. So it's a bit slower. So most of the times you'll want to be using the @input event. We have mouse events. One of the mouse events that you can use is the mouse over event. And this is triggered when the mouse pointer enters the div and your named action will get called. There are keyboard events, and what this does is look for any key that gets pressed. As soon as a key gets pressed down, the named action will be ran. There are also key modifiers, and that's a bit more specific. So instead of just waiting for any keyboard event, you can look for specific ones, such as the enter key. So what this is doing here is when the enter key is released, my named action is run. So this could be used when you have a submit button. You just want some more ease in submitting. They don't need to click it. They can hit enter and go on to the next page. These are a few examples of what's possible. And we can use most JavaScript events with the Vue on directive. So these were some of the possibilities that were demoed, and I'll let Hassan and Andrew take over.
Hey guys, yeah, I'll take over from here and kind of show live examples right now and how you can get started by using some of this stuff. So I'll go ahead and share my screen right here. And as you can see, you just got into a BetterForms page or an empty page right now, and I'll get you guys started. First, we can take an HTML component right here, put it in. I'll put in a data model inspector so you guys can see what's going on. So, all right, let's get started. So the first example we can use is an add click, because that's probably what most of you will be using most often, as it's pretty powerful. So over here, we can simply put in an action, style it up how we want. Okay, and now let's see what this would do. So right here, we put a named action on this, and this named action, all it's doing is simply running an alert over here. So if I click this, there we go, we have an action. Now this is JavaScript, and you can make it do anything you want in here pretty much. So this doesn't have to just be an alert. Another example we'll go over that Christina was talking about that's also pretty good is mouse over. So over here, we'll add another one. So over here, I'll do inline instead of making a named action, so you can see that this is also possible. So right over here, we'll have another one right here. Let's get rid of this. So right here, now we can see what's happening. So over here in our model, we have is true normally, but as you see, it's hovered. Now it's changes to false. Hover again, true, false. Now this is also used in a lot of places as like Pearson designs, where if you hover over something, that's when you're able to see a state. For example, if I hover over this, then I'll be able to see, for example, maybe an X mark or an edit icon that will let me change things. So this is where hover can be used in a lot of places. And for that, it's called at mouse over, is where it's used. And now another one I'll go over is input fields, because this is also fairly used. And Christina talked about two different examples of at change and at input and when to use both. So let's have this. Put alert in here. Typos there. All right, and now let's see how this happens. So Christina said at input will simply just be run whenever this is changed. So right here, functions ran when I attempted to change it to 2. So this is run instantly pretty much. And now the difference between at change over here is this runs when the values actually gets changed. So if you notice in the previous one, it ran before my 1 turned into a 2. Now over here, I'll change this into a 2. I'll click off, and now my function ran. So over here again, I'll change this to a 3. It hasn't run until I unfocus out of here, and the value is changed. So those are some quick examples right there, and Andrew will take it away to show you guys some more examples.
Thanks, Hassan. I want to show a bit of another use case that you may run into when developing your apps. I have a page here, and I'll share my screen. That showcases a few uses of Shoelace. And what Shoelace is a library of web components that contains a number of clean-looking widgets, such as a drawer. We have like tooltips here, perhaps a detailed toggle, a drop down, and how about some radio buttons? And while these are cool, I want something to happen when I click on them. I want my data model to change when I click on, let's say, a specific button. This is where we can implement some of our event handlers. Let's go to the code. And here are my radio buttons using Shoelace components, and they have a label and a value. I'm going to add a click action to one of these buttons here, which is just at click equals and then some code. I'll have a key in my model called, let's go with selected option. and I want to set it to the value of the button that I just clicked on. But how do I know what the user just clicked on? You may be familiar with vModel, which handles a lot of this for you behind the scenes, but this may not always be available to you when working with some components. So instead, we can take advantage of the dollar event. And what the dollar event contains is all the information about the event that the user just triggered. In the interest of saving time, we can get to the value by going event.target.value. And let's go test the button. So I hit save. And that save seems to be taking a while for some reason, but we'll let that run there. You can see on my page here that these buttons here are wired to the model. So when I click on something like web app, you'll see that it changes the device type or FMS, web viewer, etc. The contexts here as well are wired to the model. So you can see I can select a few and it adds it into my array here. There is a lot of details that we skimmed over, so take advantage of the docs for more information, such as event modifiers, which may come in handy when handling multiple events that get triggered at the same time, such as having a button over another button. But that sums up a bit of what we want to show on event handlers. I'll have this shoelace example available at some point as well if you want to take a look at this library, because I think there's some cool stuff in here that you can really take advantage of and make some clean looking apps with. Made it there, Charles.
Thank you, Andrew. All right, we're going to just jump up to our feature. I'd like to welcome Jake Johnson from Angel City Data. He's the director of design there, and I understand he's just celebrating an anniversary. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that in a second. I remember onboarding Jake and when we first started using the platform, and it was like such a great session because I found we kind of resonated well, and I could see the wheels turning about all the things that he's like, okay, I can build this, I can build that. I kind of felt like BetterForms was suddenly opening up this horizon for him in terms of a tool. So we wanted to have him on for a while now, and here he is. So Jake, welcome to our Friday Live.
Thanks, Charles. That picture's a couple days old.
Yeah.
So good to be here.
So, oops, I'm going to stop my share here. All right. So you are just celebrating is it 10th or 9th anniversary?
So it's 10. Big
10,
one.
right. Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. And what do you guys do there? Can you tell us a bit about Angel City?
Yeah, I mean, we're first and foremost a custom software shop. We work with all kinds of clients, small mom and pops to, industry leaders, gigantic organizations, departments within organizations. We really are. I mean, we are not so much. We traditionally, historically, haven't been a product shop, although that may be changing soon with the help of BetterForms. So we've seen just about everything in terms of just the different possibilities, that the different needs in FileMaker and other platforms. But FileMaker Platinum partner, like Charles said, I've been here 10 years. I think this is our 21st year. I think we just hit 20. So we've been in the game for a little bit. We pride ourselves on three things: design, partnership, business partnership, and tech support. We've won awards for all three. We strive to produce some of the hopefully more forward-thinking design structures in the FileMaker world. We've given some talks on that. We also are, we have some of what I think are the best FileMaker developers in the industry working for us. But before we do anything, we are first and foremost business partners with all of our clients. Our clients tend to think of us more as a partner than a vendor because of the deep relationship work that we do up front and throughout the process. We tend not to touch a keyboard until we know exactly what we're building. So we're very, very much a measure twice, cut once kind of operation. So that's our sort of second tent pole, and then our third would just be our tech support. We are like, you know, I'm 36. I've been here 10 years, which is, I'm sure all of you know, in the software world, rare. I mean, we don't typically, you see a lot of job hopping in this world. We keep our people. I mean, our average tenure here, I think, is over 11 years, which lends itself well to just the culture that Dave, our president, has created. You know, just keeping our people around has lent itself into this world-class tech support. When someone builds your system from our company, that same person is likely to be here in 5 or 10 years, meaning they answer the phone when you call, so you don't get passed around to all these new folks. Customers seem to enjoy that. So that's just our, you know, those are our 3 key principles.
Cool. I understand that. Let me just jump to here. I don't know if I think it was Dave that was telling me this. This was this is Claris's Claris.com's website, and this is an app that you built.
Correct.
Designed.
Yes. It was funny. I had to, speaking of Figma, I actually had to modify the look and feel of FileMaker a little bit for Claris on this, because if you've used FileMaker for any extended period of time, you know that the background of the FileMaker layout mode window is not dark like that. It's sort of this ugly gray. So we actually had to screenshot the FileMaker system and then lay things on top of it, but it ended up looking really good. And that is a real screen from a real system. That's a real dashboard that the first customer that we put on BetterForms is using, actually.
That's cool. I didn't even notice that. I was just saying, I was on a call yesterday with somebody, and I was saying, "Oh, this is dark mode on here."
Yeah.
It's like I never use that.
Yep, it is not real.
That's funny. Has anybody noticed that this is not available? That's not a real.
It was. I wish it just mirrored the layout background that you've selected, but and I submitted that feedback when I submitted this screen. So I know Claris is aware of it, but yeah, it took a degree of work to get the window to match. They really wanted to highlight the screen, and the box of layout mode was really distracting. So we had to sort of mock it up.
Cool. What do you guys when you mentioned that you do FileMaker development, do you develop anything outside of FileMaker as well? Any other like Salesforce or
you know, we did with Salesforce, and we don't anymore. There's just so many tools that we can use that it sort of showed itself out. Customers stopped asking about it, to be honest. We used to have a lot of customers ask about it, and now it just isn't really front of mind, I think, for a lot of people, just because of the expansion, the array of tools that we have at our disposal. So yes, we do a lot of FileMaker developing, but we also do a ton of web work. In fact, I think 3 of the 4 biggest jobs that we've worked on in the last, I'd say 4 years, about 4 or 5 years, have been full stack web apps. So we have pretty deep chops in that area, and we've got some really happy customers. But you know, in the world of web development, you sort of, and it, you know, in the file, within the FileMaker sort of parameter, you have, you know, WebDirect. We've all used it. I'm sure we have varying thoughts on its functionality and performance. And then you have this full stack world, right? It almost always, I want to say 95% of what we work on does have a FileMaker component, whether it's like the data model with some administrative access on FileMaker Pro, and then the data model gets, you know, leveraged outside of FileMaker through the web. So we've always interacted with FileMaker, but we felt sort of straddled between these 2 extremes. One being WebDirect, really low cost of entry, you know, easy to build. Anyone who knows FileMaker can build it. Has a lot of limitations, performance limitations, especially we've noticed. And then the other end is this, full stack environment. And that's it's expensive. I'm not sure what the exponent is when you're talking about FileMaker to full stack web, but it's got to be, I would say it's at least 3 to 5x typically. And so that sort of puts it out of reach for a lot of our customers, because unless there's a definite need, and there has been for a few of our deeper pocketed customers with larger system needs. But it was hard to grow that part of our business because it's hard to pitch. It's hard to pitch like, hey, you should spend 5 times the amount on this thing because we can put it in the web. And so late last year, after researching options, stumbled upon BetterForms, and it's become this really important tool in our belt that helps us not feel so straddled between those two extremes. We really have the ease and the scale of, or the ease of development, the comfortability in the environment, the sort of safeguards of what you would think of when you think of WebDirect, but we have the scalability and the deployment structure and the support. Especially, I want to call out the BetterForms team for their support, because it's really, really good, of like a full stack web app, because at the end of the day, that sort of is what it is. So we started, Charles was talking about our onboarding, and I remember it. And I remember Charles taking a Zoom meeting with me at 11 p.m. in a hotel room in Nashville, Tennessee, as I was preparing to pitch the solution that we were starting to build for our first BetterForms customer. And I don't know if I ever formally thanked you for that, but I thank you, first of all. And secondly, it really started us on this journey. At this point, I think I want to say just since January, I think we're on our 12th BetterForms app. And they just keep coming because it's so easy for us to pitch. I mean, it's become an incredibly useful tool for us.
So we have our clientele users on the platform sort of fall into 3 groups. Software as a service is about 15-20%. They have some type of SaaS vertical platform, and then the remaining percentages are mostly evenly split between dev houses and in-house.
Right.
So just more talking to the dev house people.
Right.
What how do you present? How are you presenting solutions? Were you going out and saying, let's give you a new feature, suggesting to the client that let's give you a new feature, you can do this now, because they don't necessarily realize what they could build?
We often we're at our best selling through demos. That's been an incredible asset for us, to be able to sort of encapsulate either a process or a workflow or a piece of an app that we can demo in 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And so most of the time, someone on our team will they'll work with a customer on something interesting. And then we take that, we sort of park it as a demo, and then we're able to use that in sales meetings with other customers. We also have, regular quarterly business meetings. Dave does this with our clients, where he does QBRs with some of our top accounts. He takes them aside and goes, look at, the stuff that we can do now that we couldn't do before. And that typically gets the ball rolling. So when we're pitching, it's intentional. We don't just grab somebody just because. We look at a demo that someone on our team has built. It's recently been a lot of BetterForms stuff. And we go, hey, this is applicable to X, Y, or Z client. Let's plan as part of their QBR review to show them this. So that's how it's sort of it's weeding its way into. I'd say we have a bunch of new customers on it. We are talking with a lot more legacy clients about extending portions of their systems that have been built in FileMaker over the last 20-25 years into the web.
Interesting. So you're basically effectively saying, here's a solution that you didn't know, or here's the answer to a problem that you may not realize there was even a solution for.
That's right.
Right. So that if I was a dev house, then I could maybe go approach some of my clients and do the same sort of thing and say, here's the types of things that you can do. What are some of those things? Just because I do demos all the time, but we don't necessarily know. I can only get enough information from my clients, and the clients are the developers, and they may not be able to know the exact problems that their clients are having. Can you give us some ideas of some types of solutions?
Yeah, I mean, as our knowledge expands in the BetterForms space, we're able to pitch more, complicated solutions. But it started with forms. It started with, man, it'd be so nice to have a form on a website that just dumped into our FileMaker system. That was our first customer. They're an events company. They travel around the United States and they speak at colleges, universities, and they needed a way to be able to put a QR code on their keynote presentation and have everyone in the audience, which is oftentimes 800 to 1200 people, scan that QR code and all at once go fill out a contact form. And then that generates some back-end processes for outreach. And we were trying to think of how to do that because their budget wasn't massive. And so we that's when we discovered BetterForms. And that's when I got on the phone with you, Charles. And it was like, look, here's what we're able to do. I built a lot of times too up front. If we can sort of see there's a job waiting on the horizon, sometimes we'll put some of our own time into building proof of concept.
Right.
And so I built a proof of concept that was really simple. I think it was 2 fields. It was one of the FileMaker templates. We threw it up on a server with the BetterForms helper file. And I found a QR code generator that's specific to FileMaker. And I was able to, build all of that in a handful of hours and then show the client, hey, this is how we can do it. I'm confident in the platform. I'm confident in the scalability. They were really concerned about, hey, we have a lot of people at these things. Is this going to handle that? We've had, I think they've run a couple hundred events through the app at this point with an average of 1,000 people per event. Hasn't been an issue one time. So that's how we started. We, was just the general form, getting your head around what BetterForms is, and at the beginning it was like, oh, you can make great forms that integrate with your FileMaker solution. As we've deepened our knowledge, as we've built more tools, all of a sudden we're realizing, wow, we can actually do quite a bit more. So at this point, we're pitching several of the largest clients that we have, full-blown mobile applications that integrate with their FileMaker backend. A lot of our customers leverage BYOD environments, so bring your own device environments, where they're using mobile device management, but their employees are able to bring whatever device they feel most comfortable with. And this kind of speaks to the UX corner that Pearson, I really liked that, by the way, that Pearson was talking about earlier, where you don't always get to dictate what device one of your users are going to use your solution with. And so we were stuck in this, WebDirect versus FileMaker Go world for so long that oftentimes it was like, well, if they want a native application that runs on Android, we're going to have to build that. That's going to be a pain. And all of a sudden, boom, that whole world is now opened up for us. And we're actually in the middle of building a mobile system that has a FileMaker backend in BetterForms that will run offline. So we're leveraging a sync model for an average. I think it's about 200 technicians in the Southern California area. They're doing electrical work, they're doing plumbing work, they're doing all of this. They get city contracts where they're going in, and it's a convention center, and we're rewiring everything, and we're putting brand new lighting in. They're doing that. They'll be doing that in BetterForms, and we're actually replacing an application that we built in React 3 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
And why are you not revisioning the React app then?
It became too expensive to maintain.
I see.
The customer is a large customer, but when you're spending many hours tuning, fine tuning things, when really it's not that important of an ask, but it is important enough to ask it, those bills get annoying. And I understand that. And so now we're able to go, oh, we could fix that in 15 minutes, So it's just the supportability, the maintainability has met the scalability. And I think that's why the client made the decision. We pitched BetterForms as a platform, showed them what we were doing on it. And they said, at first they're skeptical because they don't know what it is. And then we showed them what we're able to do and they go, great, let's move forward. So it's great work for us. It gets BetterForms, deeper ingrained in our sort of DNA, and it's better for the customer. They can ask us for more interesting things. We're not spending all of our time fixing little things that take forever to fix. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So just going back to that QR code app. So
yeah,
a FileMaker app was displaying a FileMaker layout on the screen, and that QR code was unique?
No. So the FileMaker app, they set up an event. All right, we're going to do this event at this college, in this room, this building, etc. FileMaker periodically goes through and creates a few things, some promo material. So we've got a whole PDF engine that we're building their posters in, that just takes fields from FileMaker, drops it into a layout, creates a PDF, minifies it, and brings it back in as an attachment. And one of those things that we're creating for every event is a custom QR code that is the BetterForms app URL / some UUID, right? That UUID is tied to that event. And we have an export for the QR code because they're very, very brand aware, this client. And so they have a keynote deck that they use at every event. That keynote deck is brand specific. So we needed the QR code to match the brand with the colors, et cetera. So they export the QR code as a PNG that then gets dropped into the keynote slide for the very last slide of the presentation. And it's, I think they've got 3, I don't know why they put it on there 3 times, but they put it on there 3 times, I think, to accommodate for any angle that somebody might be sitting in. So they scan from the keynote, it opens up the BetterForms page. It goes to FileMaker, it requests the events details, it displays them on the screen, and then it asks them for some contact information as well as some metric gathering that we use for some reporting and some outreach, tailored outreach. So we're leveraging not only BetterForms, but we're also using Twilio for text outreach, and we're using the Mandrill add-on for MailChimp for nightly emails to these people. So there's quite a few things going on in this it's started as a really little tiny system, and it's just grown exponentially.
The bring your own device, that's actually really, really powerful. And just to for the consultants, and actually even for the in-house people, just to give you some ideas. When you have a bunch of users, especially if the users are somewhat transient, they're placing an order for something and they're in a queue and they are waiting for their turn to come up in line. They're placing a snack or an order at a snack bar. We have one user who has a software as a service, but they for their product, they have to use drivers for deliveries.
Okay.
And the drivers don't work full time for the businesses.
Yep.
So what they do is they send an SMS, and it's not a QR code, but it's the same concept. They send an SMS to the app, and that SMS drops a cookie on the device. So the device is effectively logged in for that day. The cookie lasts 1 day. So that's their authentication. And the driver comes in, they get an SMS. So it's okay, I got my items. And they go into the fulfillment area, they grab their items, they check them off on the app, and then it shows their delivery instructions is the next step. They go through and they can through the app, they can they can grab directions, they can make a quick phone call, and that actually uses that share API type concept where they can instantly call the users. And then from there, they take a picture of the delivered product, and now they can just add a video in as well. And this entire experience is done as like an app, but there's 0 download, there's no compatibility, there's no app store and all of that stuff.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're dealing with when you're talking about BYOD, we're talking about a lot of different browser and platform combinations. So, we need to be able to support all of that, but we also need to be that example is a perfect example, Charles, where it's like building that in a full stack environment. I mean, I never do estimates live in public ever. But it would be It would be a big ask. I'm listening to you, go through that, and I'm like, I could spin that up in BetterForms inside of a week. You know what I mean? And that was previously unavailable to us except for WebDirect.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, well, I should frame it differently. BetterForms has better browser fidelity than WebDirect. It's got more browsers that support it. We're not limited by there's some funky performance things. All of you, I'm sure, understand, some of the challenges with drop down fields, etc. So we don't have any of that. We are so much more equipped to pitch solutions for customers with a bring your own device environment, because we have the confidence in our browser fidelity, in the list of browsers that are supported. We are platform agnostic, at this point, whereas before we were super tied to, I'm a Mac user, I'm an iPhone user, and that's well and good, but a lot of our customers aren't. And we would have to turn down work if that was the ask, and if their budget didn't align with what it was going to take to build something full stack.
We actually did a lot of work 2 years ago to make sure that we were compatible down to Explorer 11, I guess it is, or whatever.
Oh, bless you.
One. Yeah, that was, and poor Eduardo, I think he's a young guy, but I think he's got some gray hairs just from that alone.
Yeah, I bet.
Have them. But yeah, we did that, and eventually we'll remove that, because there are virtually no browsers that are that legacy, and everything is what's called evergreen. All the browsers update automatically, and they all stay pretty fresh.
Yep.
But there are a lot of incompatibilities between, say, Safari and Chrome and so on.
Yep.
Incidentally, if you're ever looking for that, it's can I use, I think is it. And then you can check can I use. And for example, Andrew was talking about the share API. So if I go share, let's go API, see if that is there. Web share API. So you say, well, can I use it? Well, now in Chrome, I can use it in all these versions here, and Edge and so on. You can see it's pretty compatible across the board from around here on. So this gives you a really good idea if you can use something. And most often, if there is something that's not compatible between one device and another device, you can either recode the way you're doing it slightly. If you find that, wow, it turns out that they have these legacy tablet touchscreen things that they're carrying around in the shop, and they're running on this really old version, you can recode stuff to be compatible. And because BetterForms allows you to use third-party APIs, you can use shim type code, basically code that transpiles on the fly. This new thing that you're using to run it on a legacy browser. So that is possible. If anybody ever runs into those problems, please do reach out in our support, and we'll whip up an example for that as well.
Awesome.
So you guys run a meetup, right?
We do. With the largest FileMaker developer group, I think in California, I think in North America. It was started by our fearless leader, David Knight, and a cohort of other developers a long time ago. It's called FM Disk, FMDISC. Yep. And there you go. There's FM Disk. It runs, I believe, I don't remember if it's the first Friday or the last Friday. I think it's the first Friday of every month. And I've been on there a few times. Dave's been on there quite a few times. There's always really interesting content in there, and it's not always There's Jonathan Reff. He's one of actually, that's the meetup I did where I presented BetterForms.
So this is a really, really cool thing. This was right around, I think, the time that this came out.
Yeah,
the Vision
it
Pro.
was that week.
and you whip something up really quick.
Yeah.
And it's actually a really nice demo if you want to get inspired by design. And we'll get into talking about that. Check this video out. I'll post the link here. And he builds this little app here. You can sort of see the side of it, right? By using this transparency in the background. It looks really, really sexy. And you talk about things. So I'll post that link. I'll post a link to this. Actually, we'll just get this part here, and I'll post that in the chat.
Oh, and I just received word as well that FM Disk runs the second Friday of every month.
Second Friday of every month.
Yep. And actually, that was the first time that I got to use components in BetterForms, which is a game changer for me as a designer. Being able to build modules for our developers, to be able to use as sort of, I don't want to say black box, but you know what I mean. Well-designed modules that take in input and provide output, that are well documented. Being able to just build once and give my developers the ability to consistently use those widgets across platforms and across pages is huge. So not having to rebuild the same thing over and over. We were experiencing a lot of consistency issues, and this happens in FileMaker as well. It happens in any environment. But when you're able to sort of encapsulate a whole bunch of code into one black box and go, this is your option switcher, this is your drop down, this is, and then just those are now building blocks that our developers can use really easily. So that was the first time that I got to use those. I think I showed that at the very end of that talk where it was like, let's just take the design to the next level. And I didn't show how to use the component, but I did show what it was like when the component was in the environment, and it just takes it all up a notch. So I would encourage anybody who hasn't seen that to go watch it, because it is pretty neat.
We have a few things in the works. Pearson and Hassan are just completing a couple new wizards. Cool. And the wizards are designed sort of for that purpose. One of them is a easier to use new app wizard, and the other one is a wizard for creating a new page. The new app wizard has the ability to pull an app that you've already built and use that as the source. So you effectively are cloning the app.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it was a bit of a sell, but it's like until you actually use it and you realize, okay, I can just start with this other app. And we just did that because we're building a demo app. Andrew and I are building this demo app for Engage. And we cloned one of the existing apps, and it's like, okay, let's just start with this one because it's got all the stuff in there.
Yeah.
And everybody, I think, does that with their, some type of FileMaker starter template.
100%.
Yeah.
It's part of our pitch. We've built so many things that, even a new customer in an industry we may not be completely familiar with, we can almost always go, hey, there's something on our hard drive that is very similar, at least from a workflow perspective, to what you're doing. So why don't we start with that? And that's actually been a BetterForms thing that I've been hoping for. And you just told me it's now possible, or it's going to be possible.
It's going to be possible.
That's massive, man, because there's so many things that we build where we're like, we show the customer, right, the new customer, a demo, like I was saying, and they go, well, how much just to get that? And it's like, well, we'd have to kind of port everything over, and it's sort of, it muds up the conversation. Being able to just go, we'll just clone this repository, so to speak, and then make some adjustments. That's awesome. That's exciting.
It's funny. We have this ability, and technically we have some of the ability in FileMaker too, but we have the ability I sometimes use the term the rest of the world, meaning outside of FileMaker.
Yep.
And we have the concept of modules and basically open source code. And the whole idea of open source or OSS, open source software, is that people contribute to it and it gets maintained usually, and which is a lot of work, but somebody dedicates some time to do these things, and they create these great libraries. And we can use those libraries for free. And hopefully, if you find a bug or something, people contribute back a little bit. And if you don't already have, this is for everybody, if you don't already have a GitHub account, just go and sign in and make one. It's free, and it allows you to create and report issues with software and things like that. Right. And it really, really helps the whole open source software community. But in FileMaker, we actually have a better community, I think, in the sense of we all know each other. We know kind of, it's because it's smaller too, but we know people all over the world. Sure. They all have either heard of us or they've been in our talks and things like that. But we don't share that much. We share technique, but we don't share much software.
Right.
I find.
Right.
So we sort of have that ability with add-ons and cutting and pasting and things like that. But it would be really neat if there was a nice, elegant method for doing that.
Yeah, I could not agree more. To be able to create modules inside of FileMaker and share those modules would be, it would be a game changer for our company. You know, as the director of design, we're a small shop, you know, we're not huge. But I still have issues with consistency in UI, UX across multiple pages, because it's kind of like a telephone game. I'm going to copy the something from one screen, paste it onto another, make some adjustments. Suddenly, as you do that more and more, those adjustments kind of compound on top of each other, and suddenly, you know, the beautiful thing that you made and gave to the developers is not that anymore. It's a completely different thing. To be able to just go, this is it, here's how you use it, and you can share it across as many apps as you want. It would make my life a whole lot easier, for sure.
How do you go about doing design? What's your sort of approach that way?
Sure.
You know, you're fairly visually oriented. It seems like when you build your stuff, you don't build anything just kind of.
No,
I haven't seen anything ugly so far. Let's just say that.
hopefully, you know, it always starts on a, you know, piece of paper for me, and I'm just kind of proving out the model. I'm not an artist, or like I can't draw. My son thinks I can, but I can't. So I'll draw a bunch of rectangles, make sure that, you know, customer's pretty okay with how things are laid out. And then traditionally, historically, I would have brought my work into Sketch. It's made by a company called, I think, Bohemian Coding. And Pearson is correct. It is a subscription model. I believe it's yearly, and they're doing their darndest to try to keep up with Figma. But earlier this year, I had a customer ask me if we could use Figma for their project. And, you know, I know XD, I know Illustrator, I know Sketch. And I've used a whole bunch of other tools, Whimsical, you know, a bunch of different things. But Figma was relatively foreign to me because I had been, I don't know why, but I was like, I'm dying on the Sketch hill, man. That's where I live. And I'm like, and then finally the client sort of encouraged me to give it a shot. And now I'm deep in the Figma world with variables and, you know, everything you can do. Auto layout is a godsend. You know, as someone who needs to be able to, again, create modules and share them, when I can do that and combine it with auto layout, where it's like, here's what a field looks like when the label's on top. Here's what the field looks like when the layout's horizontal, when, you know, when it's left to right. And I can just drop those into an auto layout frame, and they're properly spaced, and I don't have to do any of that work. I think I've let my Sketch license die on the vine, and now I'm completely in Figma. So anytime we're starting a new project, we try to, you know, we get approval from the client to kind of go, all right, we don't need to design every screen. Sometimes we do. Sometimes clients want to know every single screen in the system, and that's cool too. Most of the time we go, we're going to focus on the fundamental screens and any custom workflow, important workflow parts. And so we'll bring that into Figma, and we'll, you know, first do low fidelity. Sometimes that's all we need to do. Sometimes customers want high fidelity, but again, we just consistently prove the model. I believe it was Apollo 13 or prior to Apollo 13, I think it was prove that it can fly, you know, prove to us that it can fly. And I think after everything that happened with 11, they switched their mentality to prove that it can't fly, right? And so we try to prove that our designs won't work until they do. And then suddenly, you know, what's great about that is that we're able to establish customer buy-in. The earlier you work with them on things collaboratively, the more brain trust that you establish with them. And so we're able to invite them to our Figma boards. We're able to go, hey, what do you think about X, Y, or Z? No, I think we should move it over here for this reason. Great. They're bought in. Every time you do that, now you're involving them. They're now going to champion that up the chain to any decision makers, stakeholders at the organization. So we involve customers early and often in the design process.
That's interesting. Just going back to the components, or not components, but the auto layouts and those types of things,
Sure.
and the whole concept of a design system. A design system is basically a set of guidelines that you have. This is how we make our labels. This is how we format things. This is what the stuff is, and you pick and choose the pieces and lay them out. And maybe Pearson can sort of chime in because he works on a lot of projects. Well, virtually every project that we do, virtually for in-house, for some verticals that we have, plus BetterForms as a product.
Right.
And he actually works on BetterForms, I would say Pearson probably the least, and probably one of our other verticals the most, or something like that. When do you use Jake, do you use any type of design systems like where you have it? Because that's kind of expensive in a sense for a client.
It is. And we don't always, we let the client drive that decision. Most of the time I'll come to an early meeting, where we explain the pros of doing that. You know, hey, it is expensive up front.
Mm-hmm.
No lie, it's very expensive. You're not really getting any software, right? You're just establishing what colors are, typography. I try to build design systems from a molecular atomic level. So at the, you know, atom level, we've got colors, we've got typography, we've got, you know, sort of the basics. And then you move up to molecules. Now we're combining little things together. And then we've got actual, you know, organisms that will combine many of those things into one. And those are what become components. So when you're working from that level, it can be frustrating because you're talking about colors and you're talking about fonts, things like that. It's boring for a lot of people. But when I pitch it, really what it is you're going to spend a lot up front, but you're going to spend far less over time because every developer is going to know exactly what a dropdown looks like. Every developer is going to know what a hover widget looks like. We don't ask those questions later because we've defined everything up front. I often will pull in. You're looking at Airtable right now.
Mm-hmm.
I do pull inspiration from existing design systems all the time because at the end of the day, nothing comes from nothing, right? I'm not doing anything new. I'm doing, you know, it's anything new that comes out of my brain is really just a collaboration of a whole bunch of other things that have already happened. So a lot of times, you know, I'll look at one place I get a ton of inspiration from is the Tailwind Components website.
Mm-hmm.
You can go in and see interesting ways that people have, you know, built grid lists or menu bars or, you know, things like that, because there are people who are way better at this than me who've already put in a whole bunch of work. So why not start there? You know, so we do actually, I'm working on a design. I have a meeting today, a Figma meeting today about a design system for one of our longest clients, one of our most important clients, who's actually hired a Figma expert to come in and help with some of the design system work that we've already started. So we do it. It's not on every project though.
Right. Pearson, would you say that, like, in an ideal world, and I know this is not an easy question to answer, but would you like to have a design system, or do you feel that it's not, I mean, it's obviously not practical for a small project, for a single little small
Right.
app that has, you know, 50, 100 hours, 150 hour budget, but for big, long, ongoing software as a service platforms, I think it's kind of more of a necessity. So
Yeah.
Kristen, would you rather have, like, would you like to, in an ideal world, have a design system, or?
Yeah, no, I think they're really helpful. I mean, it helps alleviate some of the decision making that you might have to think about later on into the project, because the answer is already there.
Right.
So, for example, something like the synergy project that we're working on with Jordan, Anna has created a design system, and so some of the questions that I would have otherwise had to ask her as the lead designer, I can just refer back to the design system. And there's like, I've made a very rudimentary design system for BetterForms, and that helps me quickly mock things up and keep everything within the same kind of stylistic family, so that you're not kind of deviating too far away from the actual brand. But for the most part, I've noticed that sometimes a project starts off small, so we don't think too far ahead in terms of the design system, and then it starts picking up. Like, they really like working with us, and so they continue working with us. And then you get, 6 months into a project, and you're like, oh man,
Yeah.
really wish I had
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think ideally a design system is always useful.
We're in the middle of, I alluded to, we've traditionally been a custom software shop. We are in the middle of evaluating some product ideas. We've when you notice you build the same thing over and over a few times, it might be worth thinking about a product for that, and for that whatever it is that you've worked on. And we will 100% be creating design systems for any of those products, for exactly the reason that Pearson just alluded to, which is 6 months into it, I don't want anyone asking questions about what a card looks like. That's a waste of time. When you're in the full momentum of a project and suddenly you're having to define what the design should be in a certain part, in a certain component, you've dropped the ball, I think. Especially when it comes to productizing. So, I want, my priority is to be able to get my developers to work at a high clip with high quality components. And that really, that's sort of the magic sauce, is when they don't even need to Slack me for, hey, I need a new icon. No, you don't. It's all in the design system. Hey, what color should this be? It's all in the design system. So it's tremendously helpful when we get to do that.
So that way the developers don't have to say, well, we want a new checkbox. We're waiting for Pearson to
exactly. And then it falls on Pearson, and Pearson, you'll have 400 of those fall on you at once. And you're like, okay, well, my entire day is going to be coming up with little one-offs for 14 different applications. And if we would have done a design system up front, I wouldn't need to do this. Yeah.
So this is Atlassian's design system. And just for everybody else, you can sort of get an idea of like the types of things that they define. And really, we could do this in FileMaker too. And I know some people do, they use a grid and they say, okay, everything's going to be built on this grid. And we have cut one layout with all these little pieces and just copy them and paste them and redo the elements and things like that. The only thing with FileMaker is depending on how you build the components, the idea of components not from the Figma design, but from building something, is that you build a component and you put a label, and the label has 12 pixel font. And you want to change that to 14 pixel because everybody's got bigger monitors, from their 13-inch CRT monitors now to their 27-inch digital ones.
Sure.
So we go in and change that one component. It changes it across the entire app.
Yeah.
Which is good.
I wish in FileMaker, from a design perspective, the best thing about FileMaker is that you can drag and drop anything anywhere. And the worst thing about FileMaker is that you can drag and drop anything anywhere. It's, it is a dangerously powerful design system that FileMaker's got going on. And when you know how to wrangle it, it works. But the trouble is, like I said, when you start copying something multiple times and then one developer makes a change in one place that's not consistent anywhere else, it gets challenging. But that's why design systems are important.
What would you like to see in the platform?
Oh, man.
But this is a good chance, right? So we do want to hear this kind of feedback. Is what would you like to see in the platform in terms of tooling?
Oh, man. Okay.
Get you further. Faster.
I would love, and excuse me if this is already there. I learn new things about BetterForms literally every day. So, I would love a components library that is, open source, that people have submitted that work really, really well. I would submit things that I think are helpful to the community. Similar to how you already have a ton of help documentation where it's like, if you want to use UPI, for example, I can go grab code from a demo page. That's awesome. But if I'm looking specifically for example, the component that I used in that demo where I built that little app for FM Disk, to be able to go somewhere and just go look, by category, by design language, that kind of thing, that would be super helpful for me.
Okay, so it's interesting you mentioned that. We don't have that on the near roadmap, but it was built in from the conceptual stage into our components. We haven't really, I wouldn't say shown the components a ton of love, but they're there, but we don't promote them as much because it's a kind of a more intermediate advanced level thing.
Yep.
So we do have a lot of people who do use them, but they are sort of, for the most part, obfuscated behind a beta feature. But I think that's a great idea. And we want to combine the components with something else that we've been working on. One of our team, Michael, has been taking this one project. I'll just share my screen. Yes, Sam has been taking this and he's actually progressed it quite a bit. And this is a little bit more of a drag and drop type editor. Maybe
cool.
I want to change the way these cards work, and I want to put something here, and we'll throw a button at the bottom down here. And we can throw this down in here. We can still go ahead and edit all of that HTML just like you normally would. Oops, sorry, this one's broken right now, but normally you can. We'll get rid of this piece. And, you know, and we're trying to, one of the ideas is that we can take these things like buttons here, for example, and I can drag these things on. Here's a button bar, and I can just drag it onto the layout like that.
Yep.
But we don't want to limit people like yourselves who have very distinct opinions on what they want their user interface to look like.
Sure.
It's a real challenge to kind of do those things. So Pearson came up with something pretty cool, a cool idea. For example, let me do this one here, I guess. Is the idea here is that I can add classes to things. So for example, actually, I'll grab this card itself. And you can see here's the Tailwind classes, or any class for that matter. I can create, a Charles Blue and add it in there.
Right.
And add that class in. And now if I've defined that in my styling, I can have that Charles Blue class and I can use that everywhere.
Right.
But more importantly, so let's see, this one has some padding. Actually, let's change the background color. So if I get rid of the background color, you can see there it's live, and we change it to BG yellow. 400, that type of an idea. And now I have this, I've just changed the card color. So we want to give you still the same flexibility. Christine has done a lot of work with the ability to nest groups and things like that. So you can take groups and put them inside other ones. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, this is really nice. Are these definable at a global level? Or are we in?
Well, yes and no. So one of the things we want to do is take these styles. So let's say we have a combination with a button, and let's find this button here. And we haven't wrapped everything up in some UI, but here's the styling of the button there. Eventually, this will come and get moved into here. We have the designs for that. It just hasn't been built yet.
Okay.
And what would happen is you could say, I really like this style for my primary button. So then we would, at this level here, we would say, yes, make this a global style.
Yeah.
And then anything else that references whatever the name it's called, we'll call it company blue.
Right.
And anything that references that will automatically change as well for the whole app. So that's kind of the idea of that.
Yeah, this is really interesting. And this I would say, it's so nice getting to be part of this community, the BetterForms community specifically, because man, you guys are always doing really, smart, interesting things. And you're so responsive to your community. It's like, hey, we'd like to see X, Y, or Z. And it feels like, and to me, that you truly do evaluate that stuff. And that's a hallmark of a pretty nice little community. So, just being able to be here and go, hey, it'd be nice to have components that are reusable. And then you pop into some development environment that you're in, you're like, look at what we're looking at or what we're working on. It's just, this is so cool. So I would definitely throw my hat in the ring on something like this, where we're able to define things at a global app level or at an organization level, because we might share these things across
That's
apps.
interesting. Ooh, that's interesting. Yeah.
And be able to make change. We want to define what a card looks like. We don't need to reinvent a card every single time we're building an app. Now we might want to change the color. We might want to change drop shadows, padding, rounded, border radius, things like that. But by and large, a card is a card is a card. And so being able to do that at an organization level, and then just be able to drop those into any app and then make subtle changes that are app specific, that would help a lot with, especially as we're talking about, with this new ability to clone an existing application, you want to be able to quickly then, restyle to better fit the customer's branding. Right. And so being able to do that would be super helpful.
Right. Awesome. We'll jump back, jumping back to some of the stuff that you're working on in design. Sure. We talked about sort of the design process and things. What about build out? What do you have a sort of an approach to building apps that's either you specific or company specific?
Yeah, I mean, so from the better form, and again, we are learning every day. So some of this, some people here who are more experienced with the platform might go, well, that's dumb. They should do it a different way. But we only know what we know. So what I'll typically do, you know, we're in the middle of a launch or getting ready the ramp up for a big new better forms build for one of our customers. And the first step always for me is to go normalize the data in FileMaker first. So I want to be able to have a full map of everything that I'm dealing with, that I'm possibly going to be dealing with in the BetterForms app. I want to know where to get everything. I want my as JSON fields built. Sometimes we'll need special relationships solely for the data that needs to be sent to BetterForms. So ultimately what I'm looking for is a full JSON map of all the usable data in a system. So I start there. And from there, what I'll do is then test. I'll do a data model widget on a page and make sure that I'm getting everything when I call a specific hook. I want to make sure the data looks the way that it should. I want to make sure that I'm able to make adjustments to that data, et cetera. So we always start in FileMaker and go, what does the naked data look like? Then we take it to a really simple BetterForms page and make short and basically prove the data model. And then from there, a lot of times what we'll do is work on either one small workflow that is really crucial to the build out of that app, or if it's more of a page based app, we'll build the more exciting page. If there's a dashboard, we build that first. And the reason we do that, well, I should back up. Data input, because we need to be able to affect data and data readout is really important. But when we want to show the customer something, we'll build something interesting, right? A dashboard, a really cool, filterable list, whatever it is that gets them excited.
Wrap their head around.
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
kind of juicy. Yeah.
I could sit and show customers my as JSON fields.
Yeah,
but they're not going to care, even though that's very important to the process, right? So I try always with every project to get customers excited early. Because if I do that, suddenly, it establishes trust. If it's a new client, they go, oh my gosh, they understand the vision for what we're trying to accomplish here. And look at how cool this is. A lot of times they'll bring people in from, other departments. Hey, you got to come see this page. In fact, I did a few months ago. We had a client who we built a pretty substantial FileMaker Go application for back in 2019. And they have switched to a bring your own device environment. Oops. What are we going to do? I just took some of my own time and I whipped up a BetterForms dashboard that shows all their jobs. It's filterable by any of the fields on the list. And then a really simple job detail screen, as well as this technician's jobs for the day. Built those 3 screens. I went into FileMaker and I always try to provide some kind of metrics when we're talking about replacing something that's existing. Mm-hmm. And so I'm a data nerd. And so I went in and I took my stopwatch and I literally counted how long it took to launch the FileMaker file, log in, click the button, wait for the layout to load, click the button for the dashboard in question, and wait till all the data was rendered. And it was something ridiculous, like 38 seconds, because this dashboard has a lot of unstored calculated fields. There's a ton of, the customer got to do some of their own work on the dashboard, which if anyone has ever let customers do, you know how interesting that can get very quickly. So it was something like 38 seconds. It was crazy. And they use this dashboard every day, all of them use it, every user. And so I was like, that's an interesting data point, right? That sucks. So I evaluated that screen and that process. And I was like, if I can make that process even 50% more effective or efficient, I mean, we're saving a lot of time. Users are going to be happier. The experience is going to be nicer. So I built that dashboard in BetterForms, and then I brought the customer into a demo, and I was like, I'm just going to show you what it's like to use your existing app. And then I'm going to show you what it could be like to use something new. And I ran through the dashboard, and it was like in the 30-second range. And then I was like, and here's this new one. I launch my browser. I didn't have it open, right? I just launched the browser, put the URL in, pressed enter, and it loaded in like under a second. And from that moment, the customer was like, I don't want to use FileMaker Go anymore. I want you to build it in BetterForms.
Wow.
Everything.
That's awesome.
So it's a function of finding the right pain point, right? Pearson was talking about it earlier. Understanding the people, most importantly, people first all the time, users first, period, always. Because if you understand the pain that users are going through and you put yourself through it, you know, as a consultant, what you could do to fix it. And you're not addressing issues that are not really issues. You're addressing real people problems. That's where the magic happens.
Awesome. Vince had a question.
Let's see.
Yeah, no, it was a while ago.
Oh, sorry, man.
It's okay. No, not a problem. You hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. It was with regards to I'd like to hear Jake's opinion about Clara Studio and the fact that like it's really low code and a little bit like drag and drop, but we don't have the editability that Charles was demoing, where you want the pro coders to be able to go in there and design features. And then as a follow-up question, Jake, just wondering, like, if you had components, how would you control like components that come from people who design stuff that's not in your design, I guess, theme or whatever, right? Like that's something is always a concern for me, because consistency is really so important, like the look and feel of something, that it looks like it belongs there, etc. Right? So those two questions.
So the good question. Questions. First of all, Clara Studio is an exciting first step, I think. That's my opinion. I'm glad that Claris as an organization is paying better attention to competitive products in the market when it comes to web offering. I don't have one Claris Studio deployment. That's anecdotal. I have showed it to customers, but when I show them that, and then I show them BetterForms, the platform sells itself, and vice versa for Clara Studio. So I'm excited that they're doing it. I really am. I hope that they continue to pay close attention to what in the market works better than Clara Studio. And I hope that they pull inspiration from those tools, as well as add, the rapid development nature of FileMaker Pro is the secret sauce of FileMaker Pro. Full stop. And I hope that they are careful and thoughtful about how to integrate the two worlds, right? And Charles mentioned earlier that they are they're going through the process of figuring out what the delicate balance of drag and drop ability versus custom coding is, right? Because it is hard, and to do it right is difficult. And I'm not at a place right now where I can do everything I need to do in Clara Studio, although I'm sure others are. It's just not, it's a good first step is what I would say about Clara Studio. And the second question is, okay, so I think this is more of a conversation with the team here, because how do you control that? So do you introduce a rating system for components? Are people able to review components? Are they able to comment on them? Are they, you know what I mean? So a community driven approach would probably be smart, because you would want to use components that are from highly regarded, designers, developers. I would assume that if there were a component library, that we would also have, Charles was alluding to earlier, sort of an organization level design approach. So if we import a component into our environment, I would like to be able to make adjustments to that component that are defined in my somewhere in my organization, in my BetterForms organization, and sort of save it as my own component. You know what I mean? So not just grab it and use it, although you could leave it alone and not do anything to it, or theoretically you could. But I would really like to be able to just go, I love the functionality of that component. I don't love the colors. I don't love the padding. You know, I think I can make that into something that fits really well within my environment, be able to clone it, make some adjustments and save that as my own local, so to speak, version. That would be killer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I like your thinking in terms of, scrutinizing it before you actually put it into your, full solution. And yeah, that's a great way to look at it. And just one other follow up, Charles, like, your talk or your discussion about, I wouldn't say design patterns. Remember you had mentioned that? I mean, the components kind of fit in line or follow the pattern too. Like, so you'll have the components as part of the design pattern, right? So they're building blocks to build the design pattern, if you wish. And a lot of thought has to go into what's the interaction with the component in the design pattern, etc. Right? So that's where it takes, blending all that in to think of like, okay, we're going to build a pattern, but it's built up of these components. So anyway, it's just really great conversation to have. And I wish we had more. Like, I think really, I feel like that's a real sore spot with the platform. It's just, we don't have a lot of new things that we can interface or interact with to build solutions for our clients.
Right. You end up having to roll your own, which is fine. We can roll it a lot faster than, many other platforms.
Partfully, to solve that, I think we got to look outside our community, because these are kind of solved-ish problems. Components and these kinds of things, to split it up and to dissect it a bit, they fall into two parts. There's libraries of themed components, and Andrew demonstrated one called Shoelace earlier on. But then there's the actual component, that's something that might be inside that Shoelace component, which is the actual widgetry of what's happening. An example of that is View Multi-Select, is something that it's in BetterForms, but we also use it as a external. And it's just a multi-select drop down. You say, well, okay, how much to style that up? But maybe I want to drop down and I want to show a preview of a whole bunch of different hotels. Right, so there's a little picture of the room, and then there's a description, and there's a button inside that preview. So each one of those is like a little portal that drops down. So you can use those components, and what people have done to give that flexibility and the flexibility that Vince is mentioning, and the consistency in theme that Jake is mentioning, is they style up that, we'll call it the component itself, not the theme, but the component. They style it up with the theme. So the theme is variable, it's dynamic, and it can be set at some global level. And then for this particular case where I need to select my room for my hotel, they make that one little component flexible. And so to be able to make it flexible, they use slots. And BetterForms has a number of slots sort of built in already, but the concept of a slot is just a place where you can jack in some code. Right. So if I have an input field, a slot might be the label, another slot might be the helpline, another slot might be the placeholder, another slot might be the error message and how that's handled. And those slots are flexible. So most components in the sort of JavaScript world, if you will, or the web world, are designed like that, with these slots and these flexible pieces. I think if we were going to do something like that, every time you make something more flexible, you inadvertently make it harder to use. And it's really, really hard to balance those two. I mean, a good example is the iPhone didn't have cut and paste until version 3 of the software.
That's right.
Like, it's crazy, because they just couldn't, like, surely the first time they used the phone, they needed to cut and paste.
Yeah.
But they probably just didn't understand how we don't think about it. You hold your finger over it, a thing pops up, but that wasn't invented at that time.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to nail those things.
It is.
And I know it's a challenge for us, because we want like I noticed our team, and I'm gonna kind of razz on them a little bit today. I don't know if you noticed, but we have a brand new actions tool, but they didn't use it. They went to another page where they could use the code, right? Because it's so easy, because they know it inside and out, and they can work in code. They can use all the keystrokes, Command F, this, click, click, find all the stuff. It's so much easier. So it's really hard to once you're at an advanced level to go down to a basic level.
Yeah.
And you're only at a basic level once, and you're at
Right.
the intermediate and advanced for the rest of your life.
Right.
You know,
And you
so-
build all your neural pathways and learning how to use something. And once those pathways are well established, it is difficult to get new adoption and to, to do things differently. I'm just going to throw it out there. If you're thinking of, componentizing anything, anything that I can do to help, I'm happy to help. So, if you guys are having those conversations, if you want input, I'd be really excited to do that.
Cool, thank you.
Yep.
We're going to keep going, but we're going to just jump to our draw. Unless anybody has any other questions, and we'll take more questions.
A couple. There's looks like Alessandro and oh man, Jerome.
Yarun.
Questions. Nobody uses FileMaker API to have a very quickly JSON about data. I've definitely done that. When it comes to web widgets within FileMaker systems, we actually will just use execute FileMaker data API script step to go grab a whole bunch of JSON data from a particular table or a series of tables, and then we use those to fill the data model for a web viewer where we've built some custom widgetry. We do that a lot. But the nice thing about the as JSON fields is that I can sit on a record and open the data viewer and just look at it. You know what I mean? So I have really quick access to that. But that is an interesting thought. I may look deeper into that.
It is actually a little bit slower too.
Right.
Wim has done a number of tests comparing execute SQL using
Right.
that. This is for finding records, not for generating the JSON. And generating JSON definitely slower. The nice thing about using a calculated unstored field is it is not calculated anywhere else until you actually fetch it that one time.
Right.
And we've found with literally hundreds and hundreds of apps, it's a pretty solid mechanism for developing that.
Yeah. It's also, we have developers on our team who are not web developers, but they can read those fields and they can work on them.
Right.
So it's a nice way for me to be able to go, hey, I need normalized as JSON fields for this table, this table, this table. I need to make sure that any related IDs are in there. So I can easily convey to my developers, what I need from them to get started. So it's been useful for us.
Jeroen had a question for you as well.
Sure. You still here?
Yep. I think he's just coming on.
Okay.
I think he might be muted. No.
He unmuted himself, so I think it's just maybe a connectivity. But when you get it working, Jeroen, just jump right in.
Sure.
But in the meantime, and we'll keep hanging out afterwards. I'm going to just jump to we have a draw each month, and I'm just going to grab what our prizes are. We got some new ones in stock. It's finally some new FM BetterForms shirts that they finally came in. So there's Madeline has been putting together a whole whack of packages to get those out the door, and we will jump to that right now. So if you've registered for the meetup before today, you get entered in this draw. One of our team will contact you after the call or sometime in the near future. Basically, if you're not here when you win, you don't win. That's how that works. Fixed.
Hey.
All right. And I think, David, I did see him pop in. Is he still here?
I think he
Oh,
is.
yeah.
He was here a second ago. Where is he? There he is.
Yeah,
There you
he's
go.
here.
All right. Awesome.
Woohoo!
All right. Congratulations. Okay, I'm going to stop our recording, but by all means, let's keep hanging out. Jake, thank you very much. That's been great. It was kind of fun to just hear about other people and how they go about designing things and building things.
Sure.
And I'd love to have you back and talk more on the FileMaker side, even.
I'd love to. Yeah, and we could actually
Q&A.
Yeah, and we could bring some others from our team as well, who are sort of responsible for the FileMaker side of the BetterForms implementations. That'd be cool.
Awesome. And just one other thing for everybody too, we do have a promo on. It's going to be on for another 2 days. I think it's 31 days, 30 days, whatever that is this month. And basically what we'll do is it's the same citizen developer plan, which is a great mechanism for building. And, you can build, I think, up to 3 apps, 1 server, which is plenty for most business use cases. And but the difference is we have some specialized workshops, and we're also build out a custom page for any kind of special advanced widgetry that you need to put on there. If it's something that's sort of out of reach, but you really need this, maybe it's a QR code that superimposes some kind of picture on something, or a barcode that superimposes some other image, and all kinds of complex stuff like that. Let us know, and we'll build that out for you for free. All right. So thank you, everybody, for coming out to the September Friday Live. We will have the recording available for you shortly. Cheers.